In yesterday's Shir Tanya, we began in Igeres HaKodesh, Siman Zayin, letter 7, and it was on page Kuf Yud Aleph. The number at the bottom of the page is 426. The Rebbe is continuing, the Alter Rebbe is continuing on the theme of tzedakah, and particularly the tzedakah to Eretz Yisrael. And in this letter, the Rebbe emphasizes the uniqueness of the tzedakah to Eretz Yisrael. And he does this by pointing out the use of the word chelik, or geirol. As it says, Ashreinu matev chalkeinu, achelik, umanoyim geiroleinu. And also the other pasuk that he brings, Hashem menos chelki v'kesi, ata teimach geiroli, the pasuk ends again with the word geirol, which means lot. And of course, Eretz Yisrael was divided by lots. The tribes each got their portion of Eretz Yisrael, and that was done through drawing lots. And we'll see soon what that connection is. At any rate, in order to explain it, the Alter Rebbe begins explaining the statement or the expression Keil Elikei Yisrael, that God is called the God of Yisrael, referring to Yaakov. Only earlier in the verse, in the Psukim, Yaakov is referred to by the name Yaakov, and then at the end, he concludes by saying Keil Elikei Yisrael, the God of Yisrael. So there it begins explaining that HaKadosh Baruch Hu means that God is separate and removed and higher than all the worlds, in spite of the fact that he fills the world. But he doesn't fill the world like a soul fills a body, in which the soul is subject to the experiences of the body. Whereas when God fills the world, he remains at the same time above the world. And that's why the part of God that comes into the world and is affected by the world has to be not HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, but only a ray, a ziv of God's name comes into the world. And this ray is what gives life to the created worlds, the higher and the lower. And it is within them, it is affected by them, like a soul is affected by the body, because of all the tzimtzumim that it has undergone and been affected by on its way to being invested into the created world. Now we're on page 222. Number at the bottom of the page is 428, and we're continuing on the first line. V'hinei ha'or hazu. Now this ray, this ziv that comes from God's name, that fills the world and is within the world, af shalamayla hi me'iro mispashetes b'bechinas bli gvul v'tachlis, although in its original state, in its origins, it illuminates and spreads infinitely, in that it gives life to the hidden, concealed worlds, which are very numerous, endless in number, as it says in the Idra Rabbah, Afal Pikein, but in spite of the way that it is above, when it comes down into the created worlds, into the revealed worlds, al yedei tzimtzumim rabim, through the many concealments and contractions, which means when the light comes into the three lower worlds, Briya, Yetzira, and Asiya, which he describes here as Nivroyim, which is Briya, Yitzurim, which is Yetzira, and Nasim, which is Asiya. So when it comes out of the world of Atzilus into the three lower worlds, there he nechlekes, this ziv and this ray of godly light is divided derech klal misper taryag. Generally speaking, it is divided into 613. Kenege Tayag Mitzvos HaTorah, corresponding to the 613 mitzvahs of Torah, Shehein Hein Tayag Mini Hamshachas Ha'arazu, which in the Torah and its 613 mitzvahs are the 613 ways in which this godly light comes down. Me'erin Seir Baruch Hu, from the infinite level, L'hoyer L'nishmas Ha'adam, in order that it illuminate in these 613 ways to the neshama of a Jew. Haklula Meremache Varim Shasagidim, the person, the neshama which is in the body. Only then is it called Adam. When the neshama is in the body, and the body is made up of 248 limbs, 365 arteries, in other words, 613 parts, Asher Ba'avura, and it is for the person, for the Jew, Hu Iker Tachlis Yiridas V'Hamshachas Ha'arazu Lamata, it is primarily for the Jew that this godliness comes down into the worlds, V'chol HaNevrayim V'Hayitzurim V'Hanasim, through the worlds of Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya. All of that is for the Jew, Shetachlis Kulan, Hu Ha'adam Keneda, because ultimately the purpose is to reveal, for this godliness to be revealed in the person, in the human being. So this number 613 is only a general number. If we're talking in generalities, that's what it is. But if we want to become more specific, but to be more specific, we can speak of 613 mitzvahs in Torah, or we can be more specific and speak of all the details of mitzvahs within each of the mitzvahs. As we're learning in the Rambam, each mitzvah is composed of other mitzvahs, and even those mitzvahs have details of their own. So ultimately, the Torah and its mitzvahs breaks down to endless parts, not just 613. The hein gufe halachas prati shebechol mitzvah, and those are the various halachas, the various details within every mitzvah. She'ein lohem mispar, and these details are countless. Kamashakasuv, as we find that Shishim Hema Malchus, it says that there are 60 kings. Hein Samach Mesechtes, those are the 60 volumes or the 60 tractates of the Gemara. Va'alomes Ein Mispar, but then there are servants without number. That's a reference to the details of the halachas. Shehein Hamshachas Ratzon Ha'elyein, and they are called servants because they carry out God's will. The mitzvah being God's will. So the details of the mitzvahs, when they're spelled out, that brings out God's will. And the same is true also in the person. Because before, when he was talking in a general sense, he said there are 613 mitzvahs and they correspond to the 613 parts of the person. Now that he's saying that there are endless and countless parts to the mitzvahs, he says that the same is also true in the person, because all souls that come into this world were all part of the neshama of Adam Harishain, and again, generally speaking, his neshama, the neshama of Adam Harishan, contained 613 parts. 248 limbs and 365 arteries, so to speak. But more specifically, the neshamas break down into endless sparks, which are all the souls of all Jews from the days of the patriarchs and the tribes, ad bias HaMashiach v'ad b'chlal, until the coming of Mashiach, and including the time of Mashiach, sheyikuyim oz mashakosuv, at which time we will have the fulfillment of the prophecy, of the promise, v'hoya mispa b'nei Yisrael kechel hayom, that the numbers of Jews will be as bountiful, as many as the grains of sand on the beach, asher le'yomad v'le'yisofim erev, which will not be able to be measured or counted because of its great numbers. So this divine light, or ray, the ziv, that comes into the world, is the part of God that fills the world. And to be more specific about how it fills the world, the Alter Rebbe says that it comes down first into Torah and expresses itself in the 613 parts of Torah, or more specifically in the endless numbers of halachas in Torah. And from there it comes down into the neshama of the person, and then the person has to apply it through his Aveda to all the things in the world to elevate the world and make a dira b'tachtena. In today's Hayom Yom, for the 22nd of Av, the Rebbe writes that my father said, the Rebbe Ashab said, that before rinsing the mouth in the morning, one shouldn't say the brachas, the morning brachas, except on a fast day, of course, when you're not allowed to rinse your mouth.